It said the title of my sermonette today is called Hugging the Cactus, and it'll be clear what I mean by that. There's actually two meetings that I've come across recently that reference this interesting phrase, and I had never really heard the phrase before, and then recently saw it referenced in two distinct ways. One was a New York magazine cartoon. They have those cute little cartoons they've had for decades, in which a person is hugging what appears to be a very lonely cactus in a desert setting. And the idea that even prickly cacti require love and care. Some joke, and I apologize to my sons and nephews here, that our teenagers who still require parental love, even if they don't understand this, that they do require this love, and we must provide this love and caring, even when we receive an often prickly and occasionally harsh response to the love we give. Hugging the cactus, so to speak, is the idea. So you still do it, they still need it, but at their age, it's maybe not as welcome. But the second reference, which is maybe more germane to what I'm speaking on today, I heard in a very interesting interview with the Iron Man actor, Robert Downey Jr., and he was relating his experience trying to overcome crippling addictions, sin, and even a stint in prison. He had been in prison for about a year, but he was helped along by an fellow actor, Mel Gibson, who had reached out to him, and according to Downey, Gibson agreed to help him when he needed it the most, and even offered him a role in a film that he was working on, but on terms. And what were the terms that he required? The terms were that he required that Downey would hug the cactus and embrace his darkest side, not to glorify it by any means, but to learn humility and face and own that which was causing so many problems for himself and for people he cared about in his life. To learn this humility and see the error of his ways and begin to recover and move forward. The other condition for the assistance that Mel Gibson offered to give him was that Downey someday extend the same support to another in need. And I think he wound up doing that. So hugging the cactus, really and in this context, really digging in to see the parts of ourselves that God knows about, certainly. He's well aware, but we would wish others not to know about. In Ephesians 4 and verse 22, we read, and we are directed to throw off your sinful nature and your former way of life, which is corrupted by lust and deception. Instead, let the Spirit renew. And in thinking about that, I was thinking about when Jesus confronted Matthew, who was a former, that's an interesting word actually in this case, former tax collector for Rome, which was considered in the day to be quite a sinful occupation. It was more than just collecting taxes. It had some arguable elements in cheating people of the day. But Jesus looked at Matthew in the eye and said, "Follow me." And Matthew, of course, did, but implicit in the request that Jesus made to Matthew to follow me was also a command. Not just the offer to follow, but to put away the former sinful life that Matthew was leading, to follow Jesus, to just lay it down, put it behind him, and move on. And from that point on, Matthew would no longer and could no longer be what he was in the past. And maybe to even the disciples that were gathered at the time, maybe they felt he couldn't get past that. Jesus knew differently. But that is the promise that God makes to us. When he calls us, when we follow him, we are able, with a great gift, to get past that prickly and sinful side of ourselves and be a new person, a new creation, as we know, a person in Christ. And we see this point very clearly made by Paul in Galatians 2, and we're going to read verse 20. Again, Galatians 2 and verse 20, and we read, I've been crucified with Christ. It is no longer I who live, but Christ lives in me. And the life which I now live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me. I do not set aside the grace of God, for if righteousness comes through the law, then Christ died in vain. But now again, we see exactly what we saw back with Matthew, that he was giving up a former life, which we know that Paul also had a very sinful past, and a questionable past. And when he laid it down, and again, not out of perfection, none of us can do that as humans, but to strive for living with God and living in obedience to God. And that, again, was the gift. We never want to believe the worst about ourselves. This is just truthful, and I say that as when I speak, I always say, I don't say that from a point of righteousness. I say it from a point of learning things that I've done and things that I am able to get past, and know that I've got the grace of God to forgive and give me strength through the Spirit to move on. And yet we're all capable of some pretty ugly actions in our lives. And that's just a fact of being human. And it's not to say fact of being human and therefore excusable. It's just understandable that we've not been perfected. Since we do these things that we've done, they define us to a degree. And that should make us kind of sick to our stomachs. It's, of course, why we would prefer others not to know about these things. But by facing these dark truths in each of us, we're humbled. We're not the cool, well-dressed, stylish, accomplished ones that maybe others think we are, we would like to believe, but we are rather, again, the prickly, spiky cactus that can be off-putting and not very endearing or lovable. We have a choice, though, to turn from sin, this past, and walk in the light. God knows about this and knows about this about us. And he rejoices when we choose to follow him and cast off that cactus in favor of his light and his promise. In James 4 and in verse 17, we're confronted with a very, very clear reality. Again, James 4, verse 17. Therefore, to him who knows to do good and does not do it, to him it is sin. So that's very clear. You can't get more clear than that. If you know it's wrong, and the old saying, if you feel it in your gut and you just know it, then you're right, it is sin. Earlier in the chapter, we read the well-known verse under the banner, humility cures worldliness, advising us to resist the devil, and he will flee from us, and draw near to God, and he will draw near to us. Think, as we're closing out the sermonette here, think about Moses confronting Aaron as he was coming down from the mountain. We've spoken about this in sermons and sermonettes past, but Moses confronting Aaron about the golden calf that the Israelites had created. And we're going to read this in Exodus 32 and in verses 21 through 24. And this to me is still so shocking that God leads the Israelites out of Egypt, out of captivity, and they rebel. But in reading Exodus 32 and verses 21 to 24, and Moses said to Aaron, what did these people do to you that you have brought so great a sin upon them? So Aaron said, do not Do not let the anger of my Lord become hot. You know the people, that they are set on evil. For they said to me, make us gods that shall go before us. As for this Moses, the man who brought us out of the land of Egypt, we do not know what has become of him. And I said to them, whoever has any gold, let them break it off. And they gave it to me, and I cast it in the fire, and this calf came out. And this is Aaron saying, as though, I don't know, I threw it in the fire and this thing popped out. As crazy, lame excuse for the sin of the people. And Aaron supporting that and not confronting it and fighting it. Excuses do not cut it with God. We must develop humility. So hard to do at times, but we have to develop the humility to see ourselves as God sees us, not as we would like to believe, or perhaps as the people we work with would like to see us. God accepts us despite sin, yet he calls for us to reject the sin and embrace him, obey him, and move on. We will stumble, but we have him, we have the Spirit to rely on. When we do this, we can get past the cactus and begin to heal.